Hey, oh, it just lagged. Okay, that's no problem. Um, so I wanted to tell you about my trip back to the States. The whole transit, maybe it's called transit also in English. I can't quite remember, which is strange. But what ended up happening is so I took Air France and I flew from Istanbul, stopped in Paris, and then went straight back to Detroit, which is where I am right now. And the weird thing was, I got on the plane and I couldn't stop thinking in Turkish. It was weird, all the things that you say a lot, like yok, which you would say in Turkish, which um, I mean it has different meanings, but basically, if someone tells you that something's not working or something like that, you tell them yok. And another thing is sal, which means thank you in an informal way. Uh, Şey, which is like or It's very interesting. But instead of saying or Turkish people say she. And it comes from Arabic, if you know she in Syrian, or shayt in formal Arabic. So it's interesting. So they say that so that I might go to someone and be like shay, and then say something because it's like hey, I don't know how to translate it, but it's interesting. It's something said very commonly, very commonly. And so I would say that. I would say things like or I would think them and sometimes begin to say them and then stop. It was so strange just getting out of there. Um, and the most interesting thing is, as this plane takes off, and now I'm in this Air France French plane, things start to change. The language that I once spoke becomes pretty much useless because I'm not surrounded by Turks anymore. I'm surrounded by either French people, but a lot of Americans, surprisingly, a lot of Americans. And then not only the language I spoke, but the culture which I had learned. It had suddenly, stopped being so useful. And even the coins that were in my pocket, the very same Turkish coins with which I used to buy things, food, and yeah, mostly food, but anything that I wanted, whether it's a fare in the bus or something like that, those all became useless. And it was just so interesting that once we took off, all the money I had on me, all the language, the expressions, the culture, just no longer useful once I left Turkey. I just thought that was so fascinating that even though it's so diverse, that it's still limited. It's like learning, I don't know, Mandarin Chinese, a language that's spoken by over 1 billion people. But the second you leave China and you start going westward, you have all these other different cultures. And even when you start going east, I'm not saying it's a useless language outside of China, but I'm saying that, it depends on where you are. It really depends on where you are. And I'm still struggling to find more Turkish people, although I found some. It's very interesting. Um, so English and French became the mediums of communication as my mind lagged behind. When I got to Paris, it was time for Asr prayer. So this is ikindi namazı in Turkish. See, I still remember. I know how to say the prayers in Turkish, but I don't know anybody here who even uses those. I had to relearn, as you remember, relearn the names of the prayers and stuff like that. Uh, Interesting. So I go there and I need a place to pray. So I don't know how the Paris, international airport works. In some places they don't want you to pray or anything like that, or some places they're very welcoming, like I said before in DC. So I just went up to my gate and I spoke to the lady. She was American, but she was also, of course, fluent in French. I just told her, I was like, "Is there a place where I can pray?" And she's like, "Oh, we don't stop people from praying." And I was like, "Yes, thank you. That sounds logical." But it's not like that everywhere in the world, of course. So she was talking to the man beside her, and he was French, and he spoke French and English, and they didn't know. And so they called another flight attendant, and she was, more had a darker complexion, right? And she's speaking to me in French, and I could just understand that she was asking me if I knew French. So I was like, "No, je ne parle pas le français," which is the very little French that I know. So I was like, "No, I don't know how to speak French. I can't speak French." And so she then turned to the lady beside me and she was asking her in French, and she was like, "Does he know how to speak Arabic?" And So I said yes, and then it was just strange. We just flipped into Arabic, and it's like the other two French people walked away, and this flight attendant and I, we just spoke in Arabic. And she's like, "Hey, where are you from? Are you from Lebanon or are you from Syria?" Because she could know, because I chose to speak in the Syrian accent, or the Levantine, in general, but specifically the Damascus, that the dialect in Damascus. So I was speaking to her in that, and it was so strange that even in France, Arabic is very useful, I tell you. There are so many immigrants there. I don't know how many million, but in Germany as well. I used Arabic in Germany to get around, if you remember. So it's so interesting. So I guess maybe the language and the culture, isn't so exclusive to one place. If we find immigrant populations, and I'm not saying, once they live there and they become citizens or whatever because I look at a person who has come from another country and I don't really see them as really coming from another country. I know this sounds very bad, but I just got so used to being asked where I'm from and the country and the city, and my citizenship and where I had grown up didn't matter. It was my lineage. And that was more important in Syria and Egypt and Turkey. And so it's kind of affected how I think as well. And so when I meet people, I'm just like, where are you from? And if people tell me like Chicago or Los Angeles or New York City, I don't know, that's one thing, but I want to ask more. And it's not always cool. I mean, what do you say to like a black American, for example, who perhaps doesn't know where their ancestry is from, specifically, Or what do you say to a white American who really just is out of touch with where perhaps from Europe their family came from, or someone who's adopted, or an orphan. It's not so clear, and it's not the best way necessarily, but it's one way that has affected how I view the world, and I just found that interesting. And so she was from Algeria. Of course, there's a lot of Algerians in France, and she helped me out, and she was like, "You can pray over there. That's a very good spot." And she's like, although I don't pray, I'm still a Muslim. And so it's interesting. She felt the need to say that, and I think that says a little bit about identity and about how Islam is practiced in France, perhaps. And she's married to an Egyptian, actually. And so she said a lot of Egyptian phrases. It was very interesting, so I could understand. Of course, if she spoke in all out Algerian, it would be a very difficult conversation for me. But maybe still manageable to get the whole of where do I pray, that message across. And she was talking about politics. She was talking about her views on the Egyptian revolution and Egyptians in general, and her friends who are there, and she was not too happy about things. So I just thought that was very interesting, that you meet someone and you speak this language that is not native to the general population in the country, and automatically for our few-minute conversation, this lady's telling me about her daughters and how they're stuck between these two identities because their dad is Egyptian and their mom, her, is Algerian, and that the fight that happened put them between two families and they had to pick sides, and it just went off. And I was just like, wow, we just met. You don't even know my last name or anything about me, but you're just going through these things. And I think she thought I was native from Syria, which would be really cool. Just because it's just like, wow, my languages can do that. So that's very cool. Um, and then another thing is that uh, so everyone spoke to me. Everyone spoke to me in French on the plane and in the airport. Even when going through the security, the person spoke to me in French, and I don't know. I mean, of course, there's the hand movements and there's the few verbs that I could understand just because they're cognates of English, not because I know the French or anything. But I understand. I understood. He said walk in and then go back and walk in again, and he said please and thanks a lot. And I'm sure there was a lot of slang in there. I don't know. I didn't understand a lot, but I got by with what little I know of French, and I think it's because of the large Arab population in France. It was just so interesting. Like I walk onto the plane and they're like, "Hello, welcome, welcome, welcome," and then they see me and they're like, "Bonjour, monsieur," and they're like, and they tell me to come in and stuff like that, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. And so I kept it for a little bit. I mean, with some of the flight attendants, I was just speaking in French, um, and I just told them what I wanted and stuff like that. So it was just it was really cool and really interesting. Um, there was a random check on me in the French airport, and so this it was very interesting. And so the lady was speaking to me in French, and I was getting what was going on in general. Again, I don't understand 100%, but you can get by without knowing a lot. And so she's scanning, and then she saw my passport, and it was American, so she flipped to English, and she started speaking to me in English. And then she spoke both French and English, but she basically said, um, go ahead, and it was my turn for the random check. But it was really superficial. He didn't go as in depth as they did here in America when I was going abroad to Turkey, where it was just, I mean, these guys is just like took everything apart for my carry-on and put these I don't know, these they wipe down all the electronics, and then they put them in things and they test, and they're like, wait, let's see if the test has, I don't know what they were looking for, gunpowder, electronics for like explosives or something. I have no clue. But this guy was really cool. This French guy was very nice, and he was really respectful and stuff like that. And so, I mean, it just took a few extra minutes. I didn't really mind. The weird thing was, I had a female captain going from Paris to Detroit. A female captain. I just thought that was so interesting because I've never had a female captain when flying before. And she did a very good job. I loved her landing. It was really good takeoff, everything. Because, with the landing, I don't know, that's kind of I don't know anything else about, planes or anything. But the landing, I mean, that's a really important thing. And so the landing was really smooth. And sometimes you have really rough landings, and I'm just like, man, this pilot. But it's probably because of the air, the weather, something like that. You pilots can tell me how I don't really know anything about flying, but basically it was really cool to see that, and I wonder if there are more out there and what that means for gender changing within the whole flying field or whatever that's called. Customs was very interesting in America because usually, well, not usually, well, yeah, usually because I still saw the sign, but when I came last time, there was this line for Americans and this line for everyone, and it was interesting that they just put us all together. Doesn't matter if you're from America or elsewhere, we're going to treat you the same. Um, so that was interesting. And they were really strict. They're like, turn off all your cell phones, all electronic devices, all recording devices. And I think that's because of the news, because some people recorded some not so cool things being said by the TFA. I think that's what they're called, and people being harassed and stuff like that. I mean, it happens all the time if you just read the news. So I think that's why they were like no recording devices. I mean, otherwise it makes no sense to me. Um, the immigration guy was really cool. Again, I had a really good experience. No discrimination for me, and even though I expected it, being that it was Detroit, and there's been a lot of things from the Detroit airport that we've heard from friends and family members and stuff, but he was just like, "Why were you there?" He's like, "You only spent 5 months," and I just told him I was like, I'm moving back to America," and he just was like, "Welcome home, welcome home." Although he's asking me about like money, he's like, "Are you bringing money for anybody?" He's like, "How much money do you have on you?" I don't even know if they can ask that question actually. I still answered. Yeah, I don't think, I don't know. Uh, Now my first act of like shock was when I get out of there and I'm looking for my older sister who's supposed to pick me up from the airport, and I can't find her. And so I have no phone. I mean, I have a phone, but it has Avea, which is the company, that frustrated me so much in Turkey. I have that SIM card in, and I can't call her. And I see a girl, and she's talking on her phone with some bags, and I was like, maybe I could ask her, hey, can I use your phone? And then I saw a guy walking out, and I was like, maybe I could ask him, but I just didn't know anymore. I was like, well, is that weird if I ask, or is it strange? Because I don't know. And so I went to the payphones, and I was like, I have no American quarters on me. I just have bigger bills. And I look inside my pockets, and I just have, like 5 liras, 5 Turkish liras. So I go to the exchange, and I'm like, hello, how are you today? She's like, good. And I ask her, okay, do you do Turkish liras? And she's like, yes, but we don't do coins. And I was like, no, but it's 1 lira. That's what's commonly used there. It's a coin. And she's like, I'm sorry, I can't. And I was like, oh, I just need like, cause I don't even know how much the payphone is anymore. I was like, I just need like 50 cents or 25 cents, however much it is, to just call my sister. She's supposed to pick me up. And so she's just like, pulls out her cell phone, opens it up, and slides it underneath the glass. And she's like, go ahead. And I was like, wow, really? So I called my sister. It was under a minute. I don't even know if they're paying for minutes anymore because there's all this unlimited business. And I made the phone call and I thanked her so much. And she was like, yeah, no problem. Big smile on her face. I was just like, wow. Because when I went to Egypt, I still remember my director told me, she said, don't worry about not having a phone when you get there. You're in Egypt. People will just help you, just ask them. And we have to recognize that these acts of kindness are here in America as well. And because it's really easy to start generalizing and say people in America are mean people and they're rude and different stuff like that. And I heard a lot abroad, but you see these things and it's just like, wow, yeah, your stereotype is not true. And so I was really happy with that. There's more acts of kindness coming up soon. All right, take care. Assalamu alaikum.